Greetings everyone and welcome back to 365 Days of Prog. Today we're going to be reviewing For Girls Who Grow Plump in the Night by Caravan.
Hi, my name's Naomi. I'm an avid progressive rock fan, but I'm a long ways from knowing all the prog albums out there. But this year, I'm gonna give it a try. This is 365 Days of Prog.
This album has a great title to it in my opinion, and it also has some really interesting bits in it that I personally really liked, so here are some of my favorite bits from this album.
When you've tried those, if you've infected your toes, well, you're surely in luck, you'll get a stunning good show.
You know what, it's kind of bugging me, it doesn't have anything to do with the review itself, but I feel like the echo in this room has gotten quite worse recently, and I only just now noticed that I'm missing like the piece that was basically preventing the echo coming from that corner in particular, because it actually, well, it has fallen off, but I thought it would be a nice choice to show you all what it looks like and what these guys were made out as well. I actually made them out of egg cartons, so you can see that it's like actually just cut out egg cartons and some really, you know, janky improvisation on how to put it up, but I think it came out pretty nice and it does the job, so, you know, I just wanted to show you all that. But anyway, I'm gonna try and get it up there again in the next few days. So whenever it comes down to actually reviewing a band which we haven't reviewed on this series before, I usually tell you some backstory and history about the band we're talking about, when in exception I don't really do that when it comes down to the really well-known bands, and in today's case I kind of didn't know whether I wanted to tell you a whole lot about the history of Caravan or not, because they are quite well known, but I decided that I would go ahead and tell you just a bit about them. So in 1964 in Canterbury in Kent in England formed a band called the Wildflowers. Now these guys were active for about 5 years, and in that time they actually never released a studio album, but their importance to the Canterbury scene and Prague as a whole was very much notable, because from that band after disbanding came out two separate bands which would define what is known now as the Canterbury scene. These two bands of course being the Soft Machine and Caravan, all consisting of a few past members of the Wildflowers. And these two bands in particular would define the Canterbury sound with its quirkiness and jazz improvisation influences. It all really came down to creating some new type of progressive rock subgenre, which is up until this day looked up to being one of the more interesting and exquisite prog subgenres of all time. Now, while the Soft Machine had a pretty well realized start to their career, Caravan kinda shifted in their first album, but their major hit actually came in the form of their second album called If I Could Do It All Over Again, I'd Do It All Over You. This album really showed the capabilities of the founding members of the band, being Pi Hastings and the Sinclair brothers, and their success wouldn't stop there. It would actually only grow more when in their third album, In the Land of Grey and Pink, they would see probably what is their most successful album to date. Even until today it is considered to be their best album, and personally that is the only album I know of Caravan, well, at least the only album I knew before listening to today's album. But you see, with their fourth album called Waterloo Lily, the band will actually kind of leave their rockier approach and actually approach more towards the jazz origins of theirs, and while that is a very interesting choice, many people seem to not not like that change of direction, and thus the band was led back to creating their more rockier style music in their next release, which is of course also the release we're gonna talk about today, called For Girls Who Grow Plump in the Night. Now, I of course never listened to Waterloo Lily, and thus I really don't know how the music on there really sounds, but the direction towards jazz doesn't inherently sound like a bad thing to me, but maybe their execution was just not as good. But I of course always love when bands do their sort of jazz rock fusion stuff. I actually really like the way that the Soft Machine transitioned towards that direction. So I don't know, whatever it is, I think we have Waterloo Lily on the list, and if not, of course I'm gonna add it to the reserve list. But for now, what I can say is that with this album today, I was quite surprised with the way it approached its music. You see, because I only knew In the Land of Grey and Pink before I got into this album, I kinda didn't really have anything to compare to, and I couldn't really tell you if I knew what the Caravan sound really sounded like. And now that I know this album, I was really amazed by the fact that it actually took a very rocky approach to it, having the basic rock grooves and rhythms, while not being as wacky and experimental like In the Land of Grey and Pink was. And honestly, I don't feel like I have a lot of ways to describing this album to you, because for the most of its runtime, it is basically your basic rock album. I wouldn't say that it's that basic, of course, it goes in different directions, and the songs, they are interesting in their own respective ways, but all in all, it is way rockier than I ever expected in 1,000 years for Caravan to be. But honestly, I really like the instrumentation and melody found on this entire album, and especially grew to love it more when in the third track, Jeffrey Richardson came in with his signature viola, and from then on he just carried this album onwards. I really like the usage of viola. I think it has a very nice contrast to the more frequently found violin, and it really sounds amazing, and I do think that it's an underutilized instrument in the world of progressive rock as a whole. Now, despite Richard St. Clair not appearing on this album with his signature bass grooves, I did actually quite enjoy what John G. Perry had to offer, especially in the track called Surprise Surprise. The opening and closing tracks for this album are also pretty nice, but honestly I don't find them to be a whole lot more than that. They're pretty much your straight English rock songs, maybe a bit longer than usual. But I think that to me at least the best song that is definitely the highlight for this album would have to be the song with also the best title from this album, because yes, Caravan just know how to create amazing titles. And this track is of course The Dog, he's at it again. Now, I honestly don't know what it has to do with a dog, but I can tell you all that this song is beautiful, and it made my senses tingle when I listened to it for the first time, and every subsequent listen to it also made that happen, and I really like that. That's even before I knew about the sexual innuendos found on it, which actually make this song a whole lot more interesting and quirky, and more like something I'd expect from Caravan after encountering In the Land of Grey and Pink. But yeah, if I had to summarize this, I'd tell you all that this album really surprised me, and I'm not sure in which type of way it is, whether it's negative or positive. I do think that it is way less experimental than what I've heard in The Land of Grey and Pink, but at the same time it does have some appealing qualities to it that I think will grow on me as I listen to it more and more times, and I do feel some sort of attraction towards the music on here, so that is always a good thing. But as of now, I wasn't amazed by this album at any point. I think there were its ups and downs, and of course there is, because it's an album and all albums have that, but it's definitely not one I feel like I could call in any lifetime a masterpiece. But if anything, now I'm even more intrigued to get into the rest of the Caravan discography, because now that I know that their sound is very versatile, I really want to get to know them more, and especially of course their second album. If I could do it all over again, I'd do it all over you, which is such a brilliant name. This album has to be a banger, but don't tell me how it is, we're gonna get to it in time's due. So this is one of those covers that isn't fully complete if you don't see the entire gatefold for this album. So if I show you on screen right now what it actually looks like as a whole, you'll realize two things. The first is of course that this album cover is only comprehensible when you see it in its entirety, and secondly, that there's really nothing special about it. Yeah, I just really wanted to show you all of the cover, but there's really nothing special about it, it's just one very long picture. Although I do assume that if some people weren't to notice that this was an entire cover, they just assume that this album is called Plump in the Night because of course that's what you see on the front cover. And that might be a poor design choice, but I actually think that it's pretty nice and there's something interesting about it. I really can't tell you what, but I think that the best approach was actually to take the calmest approach and actually put the title at the front but also at the back, and not just put it separately in two pieces on the front and back covers. But honestly, who cares about it? Like, who actually gives a damn about it? I think this is a nice cover. I actually have no idea what it has to do with the music found on here as well. I think that the name of this album, the title for it, and the picture on the gatefold are really distanced from what this album is, but at the same time, this distancing just kind of juxtaposes everything that's found on this album and somehow brings them together. I really don't know how to describe it, but I guess that's what I feel. And is the title for this album politically correct? No, it isn't, and I like it all the more for it. I really love the indecency that you can find on 70s albums like these. It's fine, it's just a joke, everything's quirky, everything's in good taste, at least I think so. Maybe not, maybe there's a dark backstory that I just couldn't find on the normal web, but who knows. I think it's pretty nice, and if anyone has some insight about the name of this album or the cover itself, I really love to know what you have to say. But this album surprised me, and maybe not in the most positive manner, and it definitely isn't as good as I thought it was going to be, seeing as it has really high ratings on the Prog archives. So to me, it's gonna get a pretty decent 7 out of 10, and hopefully the other albums by Caravan will be better than this one. But that's about it, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for tomorrow because we're going to be listening to Albert Mercoeur by Albert Mercoeur. I really don't know if that's how you say it, his French, but that's a really obscure album, so hopefully if anyone knows it, you're hyped for that next episode, and if you don't, well, I don't know what to do. But anyway, I want to thank my lovely supporter over on Patreon, so thank you so much to Clay Walnum, you are the best, and if any of you want to support me over on Patreon, you can find the link down in the description or in my about page. But that's about it, guys. Have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Bye, guys.